a potential bombshell in the 22-year-old O.J. Simpson murder case. The Los Angeles police now testing a knife reportedly found buried at Simpson's former home at Rockingham. Is it the murder weapon? And why is it just being tested now?
The off-duty or retired officer was working in the area of the Rockingham estate, and he claimed that an individual who claimed to be a construction worker provided him with this knife, claiming that it was found on the property. So he held on to it until just recently when we discovered that he had it, and we have now recovered it within the last month.
Well, as is so common, TMZ breaking the story just hours ago, and now executive producer of TMZ, Harvey Levin, goes on the record. All right, Harvey, you and I go way back. We go back to O.J. Simpson. What's the story on this knife?
Okay, I can give you a few new details, Greta. I found out that this didn't happen where the construction worker walked over to the police officer after finding it on the property. It did not happen during demolition of the house. It happened in around 2002. The officer had already retired. He retired in '98. Around 2002, he was doing security for a movie shoot in uniform, and that's when the construction worker gave it to him. What we reported and what we are told is the officer took it home and put it in his toolbox and left it in his toolbox. And about a month and a half ago, a little less actually, about 5 weeks ago, he contacted a buddy of his at robbery homicide at LAPD and said, hey, I want to actually put this in a frame and engrave it, and I'd like to engrave the number, the case number on the frame, so can you give me the case number? And he just thought it was a casual call. The guy he called said, are you crazy? And said, you shouldn't have this knife. And the LAPD forced the guy to return it, to give it to him, to give it to the LAPD. And they are currently testing it right now for, it's called the organic section, where they're looking at hair and fingerprints. And it's going to go to serology, where they're going to do some DNA testing probably next week.
All right. As I understand, they've also been, actually, I learned most of my stuff from TMZ on it, about it, if not everything. But they're hiding sort of the case number on this. What's the story on this?
Well, the way it was entered in the computer, yeah, Greta, it was entered into the computer completely disassociated from the open case involving Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. And they did it because they wanted to keep this super secret. Frankly, what I'm told is that they were really embarrassed that it's a former LAPD cop who decided to keep this thing because he thought, well, O.J.'s been acquitted, so why not keep it? Which is kind of crazy, but that's what he thought, and the LAPD just didn't like that, so they kind of wanted this to be under the radar, at least until the tests were completed, and that's why they put it in a completely separate case file.
All right, any indication this knife could be the murder weapon? Can you describe the knife?
Well, yes, it is a folding buck knife, and that it is very possible a buck knife could have done it. I am told that just from eyeballing it, the people in LAPD thought it could be blood, but they don't know, and that's why it's going to serology. It is rusted, it is weathered, and it's going to be hard getting some kind of a DNA hit off of this knife just because of the weathering and everything else. But it is a folding buck knife. And Greta, I got to tell you, it's just an incredible story that dovetails now into the FX TV series, frankly, which is why I think this cop suddenly got an interest in framing the knife.
Indeed. Anyway, Harvey, I'll be checking TMZ all weekend because I'm sure you'll have the updates. Thank you.
Okay, Greta, good talking to you.
And a special on-the-record panel is here. Forensic pathologist Dr.
Hi.
Michael Baden, former homicide detective and criminal defense attorney Ted Williams. First, Ted, I mean, it really is unthinkable, as Harvey said. I mean, for a cop to get the gun, knowing it's from the Rockingham property, and putting it in his toolbox and not turning it in.
I would agree, but it is highly improbable that I believe that this knife is connected with the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. Look, you've got a police officer, even if he's a retired officer, someone comes up to him with a knife that is believed to be involved in this, the first thing the cop would do is say, give me your name, rank, and serial number. He takes this home, puts it in a toolbox, according to Harvey Levin, keeps it all of these years. I find that to be rather ridiculous. And let's try to make sure our viewers know there have been dozens of knives found in the Rockingham area that's supposedly associated with these two people's deaths.
Dr. Baden, I assume, like I have been, I assume you've been on Rockingham. It's a rather expansive piece of property, at least it was. Let's say that, I mean, what kind of testing all these years later could be done on this knife, and what could it possibly tell us?
Well, the first testing would be to measure it, because all the stab wounds in the autopsy report have been measured. The length of the stab wound, the width of the stab wound, the thickness of the stab wound have all been measured. There are photographs of the stab wounds. So I'm sure that the crime lab people have already looked at that and can tell whether or not the blade is consistent with the multiple stab wounds that were present.
Let me stop you there. Well, then we'd know that. I mean, they said they've had it for about a month and a half. They could, at least at this point, we'd have that decision,
yes,
right? I mean,
absolutely.
Okay.
But within a month and a half, they should also have the DNA and the fingerprints. But whatever it is, if it matches, because as Ted said, there were many knives that were brought to the police that might have were found around O.J.'s house and in the area, and none of them matched the dimensions of the stab wounds in the body. But given that, the buck knife, if it's folded particularly, there would be enough blood and DNA in the interstices of the closed area of the handle to find DNA, even if there was an attempt to wash it out because of all the little things. To find DNA and there would have been fingerprints, but that may have been washed off on the outside.
All right, two important points. Number one is that in the event that it is the knife, it's not going to change anything. Double jeopardy prevents him from being tried again unless somebody else's fingerprints show up on the knife, and then, of course, that person might have some explaining to do. The other thing to do that struck me is that if this were the murder weapon and O.J. Simpson buried it on his property, he was in jail for a year, presumably when he got out of jail after being acquitted, he wouldn't just leave it hidden on the property somehow. I don't know. But
well, he's dumb, but not that dumb, I would have to believe. Look, and I say he's dumb because he's in jail and where he's supposed to be. I think O.J. Simpson committed these murders. Let me make sure we're clear on this. I think that the LAPD police department acted sloppy when it came to the evidence.
This latest thing with the knife isn't exactly, good PR for the LAPD.
Absolutely, but what has convinced me that O.J. Simpson committed these murders, there was a bloody shoe print found at the scene. It was a Bruno Magli shoe, and O.J. said, I would never wear that ugly shoe.
Actually, he said something else. He said ugly bleep shoe, and that was in the civil case, and I'm sure we have a lot of...
But we didn't see that shoe on him at a football state.
It was in the civil case. Anyway, I got to go. Dr. Baden, I'm sure we'll be talking much more of this. Ted, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.